Hello, it's Spooky Boo. Just for you, today I have 5 terrifying stories about computers from the internet. These stories will make you think twice about chatting with strangers over the web. Come on, you know you do it, but next time remember what happens in these freaky stories. Visit my website at www.scarystorytime.com for more creepy stories and wicked fun. You may also get to know me a little better by visiting my member site at www.spookyboo.club. Now listen to our very freaky creepypasta stories. Number 1. There Isn't Much Time. An anonymous creepypasta. Oh God, there isn't much time, so I may as well record this now. My head instantly turned up from my keyboard to the screen, and a near-in-focus video feed had appeared as a window on my screen. As I was alone in the house, this scared me quite a bit, but the shock instantly turned to fear as I saw the tired look on this guy's face. All I could see was face, dampened by the sweat and fear, which had also wetted his gray shirt. The light of the screen was what was illuminating his face. Okay, my name is, well, actually, I don't think I'll say that. He turned backwards, and after he turned back, he looked more afraid. I guess I'll start at the beginning. He checked the now in view watch on his wrist. The current time is 20:54, and I have exactly 6 minutes to live. I am an expert hacker and mathematician. I am about to be killed off, as I have been recently working with an experimental mathematics firm that deals with programming and security software. Recently we were working on the notorious equation P equals NP. Sarah Geraint. If you do not understand what P equals NP is, then let me summarize. If we were able to answer this question, then every password, PIN number, and antivirus software would be obsolete. The government, seeing the problems that this could cause, are determined to silence the entire team working on it. I am the last of the team. I am going to be killed by this man here. He held up the recording device and turned a lamp on. A man in a suit was there, however he was wearing quite a menacing clown mask. This guy then set the recording device back down onto the table. Wiping his eyes, he carried on. I am allowed to have 5 final actions before I am subsequently executed. My first was establishing a video feed with all computers connected to the Wi-Fi. Again, this was my job, so I found this simple. My second action is to play the following tone. A quick 6-note tune was played as the screen cut to black. Friends and family are mainly the people that understand what is meant by that. My third action is to record this as my final will and testament. I was shocked. This meant this poor fucker would definitely die. To my brother, I give my flat round at the address that will be sent in a letter to him shortly. To my girlfriend Sarah, I give you my remaining wealth and all that is in my pockets and the moment. That is a total of 3.40 pounds, a Mars bar wrapper, and the 19.7 pounds left in my bank account. He held up his watch to the camera. The time was 20:57. My fourth action is to burn the final draftings and copies of our theorized answer that we have yet to publish or test. He held a lighter under a beige file and held it up at the top. A full 30 seconds passed as the file completely burnt. There were tears in his eyes as he carried on. My final action that I will do before I will be killed is to explain why I am allowed to even have this recorded. It is because I am being told to send out a message, and the message is this. He held up a note and read from it. The more he read, the more tears fell from his face. This is a message from the government. This man has been contractually asked and thus obligated if he would rather serve a full life sentence in prison for the charge of treason, or if he would like to be executed, with 5 actions to be completed before his death at precisely 2100 on the 30th of November. These actions, no matter how publicly shaming or ravenous, must be completed, as long as these actions do not lead to the death or grievous harm of a person or persons. It also must not interfere with the death of the citizen. He is allowed, as is with executions in the U.S., to have a final message. He held up his watch once again. It read 20:59. I have around 30 seconds to live. I watched in fear as this man got up from his chair and kneeled down, away from the man in the suit. He again checked his watch. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He closed his eyes and breathed out, sounding as calm as is possible for a person about to be executed. The man in the suit spoke in a very monotone voice. You may now say your final message. The guy said simply, Good night, all. The man in the suit pulled out a pistol from the inside of the suit and held it up against the back of the guy's head. Then he pulled the trigger. The guy slumped to the ground. The man in the suit walked up to the camera, grabbed it with one hand and threw it to the ground. The video feed began to seem all staticky, and the footsteps sounded distorted. The man in the suit aimed his pistol at the lens of the camera and fired. The video then ended. Number 2. Talk to strangers. It was one of those boring nights. I'd already finished my homework for the weekend, and my friends seemed to be occupied with things far more interesting than me. So I did what I always do when I'm bored. I went on Omegle. Now, if you don't know what Omegle is, it's essentially a random anonymous chat room where you talk with strangers. You can do this via text chat or video. On the video chat, you can disconnect at any time, and the site will randomly assign you to another video chat partner automatically. In my time on the site, I've seen some weird folks. Besides the 10 million penises that you never want to see, there's people who pretend to shoot the person next to them or ask to spread Nutella on you, among other things. In any case, I put in my headphones and opened the site. The first person appeared, a white man in his mid-20s, attractive enough. I waved. He immediately asked me to take off my shirt, so I disconnected. On to the next one. This man was Indian, a very common occurrence on Omegle. He told me I was beautiful and that I should show him my tongue. Not the weirdest thing I've heard, but I disconnected nonetheless. The next partner was a girl. As soon as she saw me, she disconnected. Another common occurrence. Finally, I found a young man who was willing to just talk. We talked for quite some time, perhaps half an hour. We chatted of video games and books, movies, and our schools, but eventually he informed me that he had a class in the morning, and we disconnected. Normally I get off the site once I've had a real chat with someone, but for some reason I felt compelled to continue this time. I clicked the new chat button. Sitting before me was a white male, perhaps 50 years old. His skin was pale, and he was very thin. He was so thin that his flesh seemed to be painfully stretched over his face. It made him appear to have the translucent property of skim milk. Paired with his sallow skin was his dark, lank, greasy hair. Now, most people wave when they see the other person. Not this guy. He simply stared at me with a strange, small smile. Despite his thin body, his lips seemed thick and overly large. They were an uncomfortable shade of sickly red, and his stare wasn't at all friendly. His eyes seemed as though they weren't just looking at a computer screen. It was like he was looking at me from across the room. I waved, hoping that he would break that strange stare and say something, but he just continued to look at me, the smile growing wider. By this point I was feeling fairly uncomfortable, so I disconnected. Relieved as I was to be done with that chat, I proceeded to look for other people, only finding a few 12-year-old boys and some frat gatherings. I found the man again. With some 40,000 strangers on the site at one time, it's very rare to find the same person twice. I did not think it was terribly strange that I should find him again. I simply felt terribly unfortunate that this was the person I would have to look at twice. But it was different this time. He still sat stock still for a time, but his expression seemed angrier, more malicious. That smile remained. Then, and perhaps this was only my imagination, it seemed as though he was leaning in closer to the screen, little by little. There was something about the way he stared directly into the camera that made me scared. What am I saying? I felt terrified. It was definitely time to disconnect, but right before I clicked the button, I thought I noticed something in his eyes. There seemed to be no irises whatsoever. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, why didn't you just get off the site and go to bed? A valid question. However, I simply felt too scared to go to sleep, as though I would see that man's face staring at me above my bed. I proceeded to the next chat person in the hopes that it would calm me down. But when I disconnected, his screen went black, and then he was suddenly there again. I tried the button again, and the same thing happened. I was completely paralyzed with fear. A part of my mind told me that the site was simply faulty, but the rest of my horrified mind was telling me that he didn't want me to disconnect. I simply sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. He stared right back. Then, for the first time, his body moved. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a paper plate, of all things, then a pair of scissors. I watched as he crudely cut out 2 small circles and then a larger half circle into the plate. The entire time, he never took his eyes off of me. When he held up the plate, I realized what he'd done. He'd created a mask. Those eyes with the enormous pupils stared at me through the small holes. His nefarious, horrifying grin could be seen through the half circle. I began to whimper in utter terror, and his responding cackle is a sound I will never forget. It was a dry, mirthless sound, a sound of insanity. It was like a mosquito buzzing in your ear. My whimper became a wail at the sound. I had had enough. I could take no more of those eyes, of that leering grin. I moved to close the internet window, but before I could do so, a single word appeared in the chat box. Wait. I have no idea why I paused. He held up an old Polaroid camera, and I saw a camera flash just as I closed the window. I sat there, panting, tears streaming down my face. The familiar kitten background on my desktop made me feel better, and I began to calm down. And my terror, pure and unadulterated a few moments before, started to seem foolish. After all, it was just another freak on Omegle. Once I felt I could stand, I closed my laptop and went downstairs. My mother was sitting on the couch watching Conan. "Hi, hon, you look pale. What's the matter?" "Oh, nothing. I think I might be coming down with something." I felt much better now, though, and I went to the fridge for a snack. I got out a piece of cold pizza and pursued the refrigerator magnets, flyers, and photos. And then something caught my eye. A Polaroid. A view of myself from the back, sitting in my room and staring at a blank computer screen. And in the mirror above my desk could be seen a man wearing, strangely, a paper plate mask. Number 3. The choosing. If only I hadn't been bored 2 days ago. I'm not the one to play those stupid games on Facebook, but boredom drove me to it. I clicked on the very first game that came into my newsfeed. It was called The Choosing Game, and had a tagline that said, "So addicting that once you start, the game won't let you stop." How cheesy. Anyways, I clicked on it, just hoping to relieve my boredom for a few minutes. The first page simply had the words "The Choosing Game" on top and 2 gray boxes I could click. One said friends and one said enemies. Easy choice, I thought. Obviously one would pick friends over enemies, so I clicked it. The second page was similar, but had 2 names instead, Mike Pickman and Tyler Rotherberg. Clearly, the program had simply accessed my Facebook friends. Arbitrarily, I clicked Mike's name, which caused the game to close itself. Well, that game was stupid, I thought to myself. So stupid, in fact, I didn't even try to play it again. With the internet failing me, I flopped onto the couch to watch some TV. About 3 hours later, I got a text from Mike that said, "Thanks a lot." Weird, I thought, but maybe the program had sent him a message saying I had picked him as a better friend. I sent him a text message back saying no prob. I decided to doze off until dinner time. As I awoke from my slumber, my wife was in the room, clearly upset. I asked her what had happened, and she could barely get it out. Mike was found dead by his wife. He had hung himself. I was speechless. I sat there hugging my wife, not fully believing. It certainly had to be a coincidence. After barely eating, I spent the rest of the night wondering if I had really condemned my friend to death by merely clicking a button. The next day I opened my laptop and immediately the choosing game opened itself without prompting. No way. This can't be real. Rachel King and Bethany Cortez were the 2 options. I slammed my laptop shut and started pacing the room. All I had to do is avoid the internet and then I can't choose, I thought to myself. Just then my phone buzzed. I had a text message, not from any number, but simply from the choosing game. It said I must make a choice, again, giving me the 2 names. It was an agonizingly long day. I fiendishly checked my phone for any calls or texts, but nothing. Finally, at 9:55 p.m., when everyone else in the house was in bed, another text came. It said, "You have 5 minutes to choose." I stubbornly decided to not reply. Those 5 minutes seemed to take hours. Finally, 10:01 rolled around and no new texts. I was slightly relieved. There was no way I was sleeping, so I finally worked up the courage to check Facebook. I checked both of their pages for activity, but neither had posted all day. Then at 11:23, my heart skipped a beat. There was a new post from Rachel. It didn't say anything except that she was with Bethany. My palms were sweating as I was refreshing the page. 3 minutes later, one message in my inbox. "Why would you do this to us?" Rachel and Bethany. I went to my bathroom and puked. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Early news reports told the story of 2 successful 20-somethings jumping to their deaths together. My wife asked me what was wrong, but all I could mumble was that I was calling in sick for work again. It is now 9:50 p.m. I've left my house without plans to return. I'm looking out over the lake, wondering how the water could possibly be so calm. Anger, sadness, and grief ripple across my body. This morning still seems like a dream, but I know it's all too real. When I opened my laptop, 2 names were given to me, James Reed and Jessica Reed. I must now decide who gets to live, my son or my daughter. My phone buzzed. "You have 5 minutes to choose." Number 4. Shady. An anonymous creepypasta. Have you ever been searching for products online and seen some products that had something odd about them? For example, you see a seller, but the name is usually just numbers. The product could be something such as a cell phone case for an outdated phone that no one knows about. The name of the product could have bad spelling and numbers and letters mixed in. Have you looked at all the products the seller has? They could sell things that have nothing in common, such as one product, a toy, the next, a speaker. I have seen this a couple of times. I cannot help but wonder, who are these people? What do these numbers mean? I had one incident where I ordered a product off of Amazon. The seller seemed fine, but when it arrived, the packaging of the product had the name of another company on it. It was open and a little piece of plastic was in there that had the name of the seller. I looked at the seller. They had a few reviews here and there. However, none of their products were similar at all. This had happened to a good friend of mine, too. He had bought a product off of Amazon, and when it arrived, it had a different brand name on it. A few days later, the police arrived and told him that the product was stolen. The company was stealing brand name products and passing them off as their own. Luckily, I got the company arrested, but I will explain this later. The year was 2007. The iPhone first generation had just come out. I was looking on Amazon to buy one. As you know, the iPhone is very expensive, so I decided to see what other phones I could buy. I was in about the 17th page of product results when I found it. It was an iPhone 1 for only $120. I felt a little suspicious knowing that the seller was not Apple, so I thought the phone might be a fake as there were no reviews saying it was real or not. Either way, I would be happy to have any phone at all. However, looking at that title, it read something like iPhone First Generation CO14197-4Z1548. The seller was Mendrix. I shrugged it off and took out my wallet and bought it. It had been about a week since its estimated delivery date. I tried tracking it, but I couldn't find it. I felt ripped off. However, 1 week later it arrived. I was very happy. I opened it up and there it was. However, it was damaged. There was a reddish stain which rubbed off. It looked like it had taken a beating. I didn't care. I would just buy a new case. The screen was fine. The problem started when I turned it on. The battery was full as if it had just been charged. I turned it on and saw that the wallpaper was a picture of someone. There were many games and apps on it already. I looked in the camera roll and saw a dark photo of a person. It sort of looked like he was in an alleyway. I searched through and was surprised to see a photo of the Mendrix logo. It said this: "Thank you for your purchase from Mendrix." As I said, the phone was damaged. I got cut from the back plate. Irritated, I looked in the box to see if there was any type of contact information. Nope. There was a note that read, "Get a cheap case from our seller profile on Amazon." I looked at their products. There were many different products, such as a case, the iPhone, but there were also the other things such as light bulbs and colored pencils. I bought the case and decided to check out the iPhone features. I opened the built-in browser. It was logged into Facebook. Being as nosy as I am, I looked through his message wall. They were all saying, "R.I.P. Carl Jason." I was confused. I then looked at the name of the user, and his name was Carl Jason. I read more messages saying something like, "I hope they catch whoever killed you." I looked in his friends list and found his wife. She was online. I decided to send her a message using Carl's account. This is a conversation. Me. Hello? Ms. Jason. Who are you? Did you kill my husband? Me. No, I didn't. Ms. Jason. How did you get on my husband's account? Me. I ordered an iPhone off of Amazon, and I was sent your husband's phone. I don't know how or why, but I want to know what happened to him. Ms. Jason. He was found dead in an alleyway. He was robbed, but only his phone, nothing else. Me. Does the police know who killed him? Miss Jason. No, but they believe it was more than one person. Me. Thank you. I will call the police now. I contacted Mendrix saying that the phone was used. I never got a reply. I decided to try and find this company. It had an address on it, but looking at Google Maps, it was just a junkyard. I realized that the address, when written backwards, does give the actual location, so I packed my bags and went on a vacation. I would walk by the building, which was just a warehouse, twice a day. I would make sure I wore something different each time. I didn't see much. Looking in the window, they would just load up boxes. The boxes were all blank. I didn't sneak in because that would be suicide. I could not find anything wrong with it until the shipments. They would have a truck filled with boxes of stolen things to sell come every week at 1 o'clock in the morning. I would see this whenever I went on a walk at night. I called the police. They knew what I was talking about. They called in the hold force, SWAT, FBI, and just about the entire police department. They swarmed the place and arrested everyone there. Amazon removed them from their website. I returned the phone to the dead man's wife. It all seems well from there. I only order from well-known sellers on Amazon now. I discovered that people were not the only ones doing that. Be careful who you buy from. The numbers and letters and misspellings could be a sign of something shady. Number 5. The Red Room. An anonymous creepypasta. It was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the large suburban Edwin McDonald High School had just let out for the weekend. A tall, mature-looking young man, Eric, stood alone in one of the classrooms, leaning on someone's desk and flipping through the rift of papers in his hands. A long weekend was coming up, and almost everyone had something due, so that afternoon had become a last-hand-in opportunity. There were probably less than 15 students still in the building. A fair-haired, bespectacled boy about Eric's age came into the room and slammed his fair-sized backpack on a desk. "Hey, are you still here?" Eric simply glanced up, not flattered by the noise. "I have a lot of papers to turn in, Ramsey." "Everybody else is leaving now," he gestured to the door. 3 mousy-looking girls walked by, chattering. "You're still going to come over tomorrow, right?" "I wouldn't drop my plans without saying," Eric said with a shrug. He often found himself the least energetic of the pair. Ramsey was a nice guy, but he was way too wild sometimes. "Oh, by the way," Ramsey pulled himself up to sit on one of the desks. "I heard a rumor about a deadly pop-up on the internet called the Red Room." Eric finally looked up, his face disturbed. "You heard about what?" "The Red Room." "Why is it called that?" "I don't know, but it's like this." Ramsey paused, smirking, trying to gather whatever story he had. "Someone will be on the internet, and everything's all normal at first, but a pop-up comes up out of nowhere. It doesn't say anything other than, 'Do you like...'" "You could always close it." "Well, that's the thing. If anyone tries to close it, they die." Ramsey ended his with a hiss, wiggling his fingers in the air. Eric laughed a little. "Come on, that doesn't make any sense," he retorted, throwing his jacket on. "How do you know it even exists?" "It just does. I have to test it to be sure." Ramsey was agitated now. "I heard a couple of people have actually died from it." Eric was at the door now. "I hope not, man. Now I need to get these to Mr. Granger," he said with a wave of his paper in his hand. "Sure, just be sure to come over tomorrow." "I will. My sister's bringing her Kung Fu movie collection." "I'm still not going to miss it." "Good," Ramsey waved him off. "I'll see you." Eric headed up the hall with a bit of a sigh. Why would you want to do that to yourself? It was about an hour before Eric finally got home. He had gotten some groceries on the way to the apartment house and knew his father would almost certainly be working late at the office again. As he was stepping into the apartment, he called out, "Dad, I got some things." Nothing but silence greeted him. As he put away the groceries, his mind flipped back to Ramsey and the pop-up. Maybe there's some kind of news release about a death report, he thought. If the pop-up actually killed someone, there's got to be written word of it, right? Eric sat down at the computer in his room, hoping to ascertain that the rumor was, or was not, true. He went directly to a search engine, typing in killer pop-up, death by pop-up, pop-up window murders, and a variety of similar things, but repeatedly he found nothing. He assumed then that Ramsey had been pulled into yet another hoax. And let it be. He went off to check his email and a few other sites. Less than 10 minutes later, while he was back on the search engine, a small rectangular pop-up appeared on the screen. Eric looked at it, looked away, and then it looked back in alarm. He stared at the pop-up for a few moments, wondering what to do. Ramsey's words still echoed in his head. If anyone tries to close it, they die. He considered calling him for help, but Ramsey would probably overreact and call the police. He moved the mouse pointer around the pop-up, checking for another link or more text. It could only be either a joke ad or a virus, as far as he knew. Eric closed his main window, checking if the smaller one could be connected to it. But the little pop-up remained. "Oh, very funny," Eric muttered. He moved the mouse to the X button, wondering if he should go ahead and close it, all the while arguing with his brain. It was probably just a joke. What if I'm really going to die? This apartment is small. I'd hear if anyone was coming in. And how could they find me? Finally, he clicked the X, slowly and uneasily. It disappeared from the screen. Eric looked at the floor, expecting someone or something to leap out and attack him. Nothing happened. He looked up again and prepared to shut off the computer, but the pop-up appeared again, this time with a sound clip of a girl's voice saying, "Do you like?" Her voice was warped, as if the sound file had been badly compressed or corrupted. Eric moved away from the computer, his heart racing. He waited once more to see if it would go away or change somehow, but it didn't. Feeling slightly more confident, he slowly clicked off the pop-up again. It returned a second later with the same garbled sound clip. If anything, Eric was beginning to feel embarrassed and irate. He clicked it off again, to which it reappeared. He kept clicking, and yet it returned each time, always with the audio clip. The room was filled with bursts of the girl's garbled little voice. "Do you? Do you? Do you? Do you?" After some clicking, Eric realized a word was coming from the line beside "like." The sentence now read, "Do you like the—" "Do I like the what?" he said to himself, hoping to be eased by hearing his own voice in the room. He was now curious and went back to clicking it over and over again. More text slid from the line, the letters in a different place every time a pop-up came up. "Do you like the R?" the distorted little girl squawked. "Do you like the R-E? Do you like the red? Do you like the red room? Do you like the red room? Red room?" Red room. Eric sat there for a second, his stomach churning. He was afraid to take his eyes off the message, unsure of whether it would turn out to be a screamer or if he'd get a virus. Both of these possibilities were 1,000 times more comforting to Eric at the moment. "I found it," he told himself, his gut turning over harder now. "I really found it. It's not a joke. This is real." He quickly went through his mind for any red room he'd ever heard of. He briefly thought the whole situation was funny and prepared to go to the phone and call Ramsey. And then the pop-up closed itself. Eric turned back to the screen. Immediately after, a full-size window popped up. It was nothing but an enormous text list of names on a red background. Eric, his hands now jittery, moved forward and scrolled through the window, skimming over the hundreds of names. He stared at them, his eyes widening in horror. Caroline Chalmers, Kay Wright, John Bay, Lucy Newport, Roy Kindlers, Mickey Fox, and then Eric saw something that made his heart stop. At the very bottom of the list was the name Ramsey Holmgren. "Ramsey?" Eric sputtered upon thinking of him. Ramsey's warning of the pop-up resurfaced in his mind. Everybody on this list was dead. They'd found the red room before him. Eric thought he was going to cry, and something inside him was telling him to run straight to the front door and get as far away from the monitor as he could. But he couldn't move. All he could do was sit there, shivering, eyes locked onto the red and black space that was Ramsey's name. Eric almost swore he could feel the sensation of cold, singing breath on the back of his neck. Before he could turn around, 2 hands clamped down on either side of his shoulders and tightened their grip. Eric howled in pain, and before he knew it, he was slammed sidelong into the wall. On a Monday, 1 week later, 2 girls were sitting in their homeroom at Edwin McDonald High School, waiting for their second period class to begin. One of the girls sat on her desk, kicking her legs back and forth. "Were you listening to the news on the weekend?" "Not really. Why?" "Well, 2 boys were found dead right before the weekend. They were found in front of their computers with their stomachs gashed open." "Oh no. Did they find out who did it?" No, but the cops think it was a suicide pact. Like, I don't want to freak you out, but they both had industrial paintbrushes in their hands. They said the boys were trying to paint the walls of their room with their own blood." The girl pulled a newspaper page from her satchel and handed it to her companion. "Here's the article. I think the boys are from our school." "Geez," the other girl frowned. "Why would you want to do that to yourself?" This is Spooky Boo. Thank you for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed the feature, let me know either on iTunes or at www.scarystorytime.com. I'm going to head on over and watch Creature Features now. I just love all the campy shows. They're so much fun to watch. Dracula and Wolfman and all of those guys. You can come and watch it with me too at www.creaturefeatures.tv.